I've got three pieces. I've got three pieces here to talk about. The first piece is, I'm going to speed right through from a presentation I gave in November or December on the data that we had collected as of COFAS last year. And it's going to show you a little bit of the depth that we have when we actually have time to go in and look at the data, align it, get it into our system, and actually do deep diving with it. The second piece, we're going to actually go live into the database, into my computer back at home, and run the database live and just show you a couple of things that I did in a phone call with Autodesk Russia to show the types of things that we can do. And the tool that I use is Tableau software, and they're one of our hospitality suites this year. And I strongly recommend you, if you're not familiar with it, you get more familiar with it. And the third thing that I'm going to do is something that has never been successful before, but I'm going to try one more time. And that is to show you some live data that we're still collecting from our current survey, which has, we've already seen very, very interesting results from the survey before we've actually finished collecting the data. So let's see how this is going to work. So you know about us. One of the things that I talk a lot about is vectors. And vectors are different aspects of information that have both a size, a scale, and a direction. There's an old joke that I won't tell again this year. You're welcome. But by looking at different types of vectors and different sets of vectors, we can get very much enlightened about the information we're looking at. And so we have a very, very complex industry. In each of these boxes, this is an old assembly. Our industry has many different components to it. And what we need to do is we need to understand what is going on in the industry and what's signal and what's noise. And part of the problem is we need to look at things through the appropriate filters. So when I press the button here, this image is going to change, and it's the same numerical data. It's just got a different filter on it with each one. And no matter how many times I play it, I always love doing that. But just by changing the way we map the numbers to this particular image, we get a completely different understanding for what's going on. And this is an old joke, but it's a way of describing different industries and the sectors that they deal with. And this is just one typical type of vector that helps us better understand the different roles of the various industries. It's an old joke, but it's conveyed, and I've showed it here many times, so I won't spend any time with it. But by using the same sort of tool, we can look at the vector of size, the primary domain of those industries, or the number of elements, or the geometric complexity that they deal with, or we have this bubble diagram that looks at personal productivity versus enterprise on a set of vectors that is project complexity and geometric difficulty, and different areas map to this fairly readily. And this is what it looked like about, I don't know, 6 or 8 years ago, and over time it has changed so that this orange mainstream mechanical design moved over and specialized moved down to the point where the specialized MCAD and mainstream MCAD had no differentiation with respect to, or no significant differentiation with respect to geometric complexity. So the question then is, how do those two markets differentiate themselves? Well, in reality, the real differentiation is not about the products themselves per se, but about where they focus, where those vendors focus their research dollars. So the specialized MCAD vendors, this is CATIA from Dassault Systems and NX primarily, focus much of their research on very, very difficult problems that serve groups of 5% of their users. Whereas the mainstream MCAD vendors have the bulk of their research for the benefit of the bulk of their customers, and which means that they end up doing different types of developments for their customers. And there's no right or wrong here, but it's just a different way of thinking about things. So let's look at some of our respondents. This is for the survey that we closed last year. And just to give you an idea, most of the companies half the companies were small, but we had a sixth each of the intermediate sizes. Most of the respondents are from design and engineering, and 3/4 are daily CAD users. It's a global scope survey and comes from AEC in blue, AEC in orange and manufacturing in blue. And we have a wide range of products. I don't expect you to read any of these things. The idea here is that these numbers do not represent market numbers, they represent who our respondents are. So we need to take that into account when we actually do the research. So what that means is, well, let's just take the numbers out. We've got 94 from Inventor and 184 from SolidWorks. That just means that we can slice and dice the SolidWorks data finer when we're looking at than we can at the Inventor data in this particular sample set. And we have CAE systems. So we asked some questions about the type of technology that you use. And I'm going to get back to this slide when we look at the second part. But this is technology adoption a year ago. And you can see Windows 7, the blue on the right is the deployed or deploying. The green is paying attention to, the pink not paying attention to, and the red is outright rejected. So that Twitter as a business tool was outright rejected by 1/4 of the respondents there. And we can look at shifts over time. This is one of the things that we spent some time over the summer, is to take all of our studies and put them into a common database so that we can do longitudinal studies. We've seen a huge uptake in the actual deployment of Windows 7, a big uptake in systems level design verification, a somewhat decrease in SharePoint, and an increase in the people who've rejected both augmented reality and cloud computing. And I'm not going to go into the technology and staffing. I'm just going to skip through these things. This is just basically saying what Jim said, that the economy is getting better. And what we did this year was to look at what actions had been completed, which is the orange in the prior 12 months. Both in the first one was positive actions, and this is budget cutting, the negative actions. We can see the differences going through. By the way, all of these slides will be available to you after COFES in the resource section that you'll have access to. So just running through this, I just wanted you to see a little bit about the depth of what we can deal with. We have the spending expectations. This was something new, and it's actually quite an interesting slide. On the vertical axis, we have what CAD systems were they using. This is of the people who transitioned from one CAD system to another CAD system. What did they transition from, and what did they transition to? And the nice thing about it, not only do we know whether it's 3D CAD or mainstream CAD or whatever, we know that it was, AutoCAD to SolidWorks, or Inventor, or SolidWorks to Inventor, or Inventor to CATIA, or CATIA to Inventor. And so there are a lot of these going on, and it's very, very interesting to see what those people are saying about those transitions. And David Weisberg, if you're here, what David's been doing is diving into the actual written responses that go along with this. So I'm going to exit out of this There's a lot more, and it'll be in your, you'll have access to it. And what I'm going to try and do is go to my computer. Yeah, apparently so. Let's try this one more time. Let's try another thing. Ah, there we go. Want to. Okay, as I said.
Just close and reconnect, and you're not going to lose anything.
Okay, so while I do this, and log in. So the vector joke. This is a mathematician's joke. Sorry, Joel. We don't have internet. So we need the internet to finish this. So it's a really bad mathematician's joke. So please take this with a cube of salt. I'm going to offend, well, and a lot more. What do you get when you cross a mosquito, a mountain climber, and a mosquito? Anybody not heard this know the answer? Okay, it's a trick question because everybody knows you can't cross a scalar and a vector. I told you it was a bad joke. What? If I have to explain it, you're not supposed to be here. So I'll talk a little bit about the data that I'm going to show you while you watch on the screen as they try to get us through. The current survey we have had an unusually strong response to. We have, success. Bingo. Okay, we're going to change gears a little bit. Who in here can explain to me what CIS is? Who from Russia can explain to me what CIS is? It's the, I think of it as the former communist independent states, but I'm sure that's not what it means. But it's the Russian-speaking states of the former Soviet Union, which include Russia, Ukraine, Latvia, Estonia, et cetera. And Autodesk CIS had a very strong input on the data that we had from the prior survey, and we had a very good response from Russia. We do again this year as well. But one of the things that I did for Autodesk in exchange for helping us get responses from users in Russia was to do a 1 hour long phone call where we did a little bit of on-the-fly deep dive. And so what you see here is a presentation mode of Tableau software. where I identified some of the information that we were looking at in the prior presentation. And I said, well, let's look and see what's different about the Russian-speaking states. Now, one of the questions that we didn't look at earlier was about the preference for, on the left in red, a strong preference in the dark red for the best of class. And in the green, the best integrated solution. And now the top row is for CAD software. So the statement that I can make in CAD software is that that those in the CIS states, or the Russian-speaking states, have much less of a strong preference for a best-in-class solution than do the rest of the world. Not much different in the other ones. And if we wanted to just look at this a little bit different, we could take the no preference folks out of there and just look at it this way. And if we take the no preference out, it's the people who still feel strongly that are different. The rest of it kind of falls in the middle. But we can go through here and look at a similar one. Now this was hiring, and most of these are the same, so let me turn some of these off. And so hiring and firing preferences from 2010 to 2011. In the 2011 data, the Russian-speaking states have kind of caught up to the rest of the world in terms of what was going on, but the Russian-speaking states were behind us in the 2010 survey. Let's skip that one. So I thought this was kind of interesting. It's a little bit difficult to read in this form, but in the top half we have CIS, and the bottom half we have the rest of the world. And we asked in this survey, and let me show you a different view of it, because this is aligned differently. If you had 10% to put back into the budget away from the cuts that you had, where would you put it? And we allowed them to allocate it. And the CIS countries had two things that were much more than the rest of the world. One was in upgrades and maintenance, and the other in upfront design. And interestingly, look at the difference, and let's get this cute little pointer. Look at the difference here on the analysis side. And if we wanted to, we can go in and say, well, what if we just look at well, maybe we can't. Okay. So let's switch gears, and let's go and look at the live data, which I think is here. And I can do... So this is the current live data, and when I get back from COFES next week, we will be shutting this down. But we have 5 different languages that we collect data in. And we have a few respondents from the language in Portuguese. We have a good number, 68 from the Spanish version. We have 90 from the Russian version, 786 from the Chinese version. We do not know yet, haven't broken down from where they are. Most of them are from mainland China, but some of them are, for instance, Chinese respondents from the US. But I do have data. I can go in and look a little bit at the data from, well, actually, let's go back here. We can look at the the English-based data and see what their country breakdown is. And we can actually do the text analysis version. That's probably the easier way to understand. That's other than the US responses. But we've got 18 from Australia. I need to switch my glasses. We've got 18 from, or 16 from Australia, 16 from Canada, 149 from Germany, 46 from France, 75 from Italy, 15 from Portugal, 36 from Switzerland, 651 from the US. So what I want to give you an idea of is that this is a very, very rich and deep data set. And we're looking at the data live. Now, we've asked a lot of questions here. And the first 16 questions of the survey all are about helping us understand who has responded. And we have to get a quicker computer. There we go. So we have large numbers from manufacturing, and we have very fine data on the individual sectors. And one of the things that we've done differently this year, we have a very, let's say half the customers, and this has been fairly consistent, are from companies with less than $30 million. But what we've done differently this year is to delineate when we have companies that are from organizations that have many different divisions, we're asking them specifically to respond from the division or location they're at. So that number actually represents many, many more larger corporations. But the bulk of the customers are in that sweet spot of 10 to 5,000 employees. And they are all over the map in terms of the type, excuse me, their role. But what I want to get down to, and I'll just jump to it, is we ask the question, how often does your firm typically refresh hardware used by architects, designers, and engineers? And we've been asking this question for quite some time, and we've seen some evolutional change. And we won't really know what the specifics of what this means until we actually get the data, process it, clean it up, and then put it in longitudinally with the rest of the surveys. But there are some very interesting observations here. So the orange on the left means that we refresh our hardware every year or less. The blue is 1 to 2 years. The purple is 2 to 3. The orange is 3 to 4. The green is 4 years or more, and that thing on the brown area says until it stops working. Which, you know, this is for, I think we're looking at desktops here, and we have similar data for laptops and so on. But so what do you think that this is going to look like when we look at the Russian data? Now, it's a little bit less robust. It's only about 90 respondents. But if we look at the Russian data and we go in and here's we create the chart, and hopefully it remembered what I had prepped beforehand. What we'll find is the Russian data is similar. How many of you remember 300 baud modems? if these things stuck, it would be much easier to deal with, but they don't, and since I'm dealing with live data, I just have to live with it. And this includes responses from as soon as an hour ago. Well, I won't bore you with another joke, but the bottom line here is that the data from Russia is similar, but the intriguing thing is when we get to look at the data from China. Same color code. You'll see a number of interesting things here. As you might expect, the brown bar is much, much bigger than it was before. There are many folks who are responding to the Chinese version of the survey who just hold on to their hardware until it drops. What's really interesting, though, is that the orange bar and the blue bar and the purple bar are much, much larger than they are in the US, or the English version, the English-speaking version. Now, there's a lot of other data that are connection speed and situation will not allow us to dive into right here, but we have a theory about why this is. So essentially what this chart says is that those in China are churning their hardware much, much faster than those in the rest of the world. And that was a totally unexpected result. When we go back and look at some of the other responses, for instance, where they are on the technology curve, where they buy in, where they deploy software, our interpretation of this data, and it's still very, very preliminary, is that the bulk of the Chinese market, as we have been looking at, is actually buying at the absolute bottom of the price performance curve, or top, depending on your point of view, and that they are just buying cheap often, over and over and over again, but making sure that there's all of the price performance penalty is taken out of the equation. I think it's a very, very interesting result, and I look forward to diving into it for real when we can do slice and dicing. We are out of time, and I want to thank you all for putting up with our technical difficulties, but all of you will be able to access this information afterwards, and the presentation here will be available to you. And I look forward to your questions. And later on this summer, we'll actually have our report out on this data. At this point in time, we're going to take a, what time is it? We're going to take a 7-minute break and come back here to listen to Christine Easterfield of Kambashi talk to us with much better hard statistics, not on what customers are thinking, but what the business environment actually is. So thank you.